Thank you, Group Captain Vijaykumar, and what a wonderful introduction. Congratulations on that, and very impressive. Normally, now it's automatically done. So, a warm welcome to all of you. Good evening. Okay, so in the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to review this book called The Lean Startup. One of the reasons why I chose this book is Cats and Bread itself is still a startup. Okay, so we are 37 years old. And there are several startups which are coming up, and startups are the real backbone of our economy as we move forward. And this particular book by Eric Rice actually gives a new perspective on how a startup should think. So it's a guide for entrepreneurs aimed at transforming the way businesses are built and products are developed. The book introduces the scientific approach to entrepreneurship, focusing on efficiency, learning, and adaptability to minimize risk and maximize success in uncertainties. Okay? So I'm going to quickly share with you the key concepts and principles shared in the book before I go on to the panelists. The first key concept is what he calls a build, measure, learn loop, which is basically an iterative process. Like many organizations, when they come up with a new idea, they try to sort of invest heavily and then come up with the idea and build a product, and later on the product may fail, and which means all the investment goes waste. So what he says is, you build a minimum viable product and release it to the market, measure its performance, get some quick feedback from customer, and then build a sustainable model based on the feedback step by step. So that's the kind of change in approach he's saying. So he gives an example of Dropbox. Dropbox initially launched just a video of how it can be helpful to the people in managing their files, and once they started getting more response for that, they started developing the product. That's how it worked. So that's the first build, measure, learn. This is what we call. The second concept is the minimum viable product, which means the basic skeleton. The MVP is the simplest version of a product that allows a startup to gather maximum validated learning, because they have an assumption that this product will work or this concept will work. So it starts small, test the assumptions, and avoid over-engineering before it actually meets the customer needs. So here he gives an example of Zappos, which was an online shoe selling company. In fact, when they started, they just displayed the photographs with the price online and checked whether customers are responding or willing to buy shoes on online. And once they saw a lot of response, they developed the platform and grew, and within 10 years they sold their company to Amazon for a big value. Okay, so another example of minimum viable product, like the actual product is not ready, but you test the concept and then build the product. The third one is the validated learning. Okay, this refers to systematically validating ideas through experiments and customer feedback, which means entrepreneurs test hypotheses to learn what works and what doesn't work by giving the product. So he gives an example of a company called IMVU, where he's a co-founder of the company. It's a 3D chat thing where Avatar was introduced for chatting purposes. So he thought Avatar will be greatly embraced by people for using it in messaging app, but later on he found that it was not taking off as the way he wanted, so he changed the direction and he didn't invest much in that direction. So that's the advantage when you have validate your assumptions by giving a sort of a minimum viable product. Then he talks about innovative accounting, which is framework for measuring progress in startup, focusing on actionable metrics rather than vanity metrics, which means if you have developed an app, don't just measure the number of downloads done, but also check how this product is used by them. So he's talking about a fitness app which is downloaded by people, but they download and they don't use it, means it has no value. But once they download, they start using various functionalities of the software, is the real metrics based on which they further develop. So that's the example he gives. So innovative accountability, he calls it. Then another important concept is pivot or persevere, which is basically startup decide whether to pivot, significantly change to product or strategy, or persevere in the same path based on the data and insights from the build, measure, learn loop. So in fact, he talks about Groupon. He gives an example of Groupon as a social fundraising platform. It started as a social fundraising platform. Later on, realized that it turned out to be a group buying deals when their experiments revealed that users are more inclined towards that. So you can change direction. In fact, CAT Center, when we started, our original intention was to provide CAT printing services. So the intention of starting CAT Center was to provide printing services. After a couple of months, we realized that we were too early in the market and there were no people generating CAT drawings. So what do we do? How do we survive? So third, fourth month, nothing, no revenue coming in. So immediately we pivoted to training, and rest is history. Because training grew, and we are one of the largest Asia-Pacific, largest training centers, sustainable business, and we rode the wave. That's how. So we didn't invest heavily on printing machineries and other things, and later on we said, okay, we'll just try it. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, change the direction. That's what pivot is all about. Then continuous deployment, which is basically rapid deployment of new resources or iterations to ensure quick feedback. This helps startups to respond to customer changing needs and faster, and reduces any wasted effort. You don't end up developing unnecessary things. So he talks about how Amazon employs continuous deployment, keep changing the small updates and new features frequently to test how customers are responding to the changes, based on which the development happens. Then the next concept is lean thinking. So this is basically derived from the lean manufacturing concept from Toyota. So how you just make it when what is required and avoid all the waste. A similar concept is lean thinking, where focus on value creation, optimize resources, reduce risk, and make it more efficient in startup operations. That's what he says. So these are the concepts he shares in the book by and large. And the book is structured in three parts. First is the vision part, where he discusses the entrepreneurial mindset. See, most of the entrepreneurs think that, okay, it's only creativity, we go and create things and succeed. No, it's not so. It has a strong management principles behind it. Though you're an entrepreneur, you need to be as structured as a large organization. It's not that, okay, you're small, you can be the way you want. You have to be as structured as a long organization. And second part is steer. Okay, delves into build, measure, learn feedback loop, and explains how startups can pivot or persevere based on the insights from the experience. It shows the direction. Okay, I have a concept, I have built, measured and learned based on the feedback. Now which direction do I go? Do I invest further in the same direction or change my direction? Okay, so Instagram initially started as a check-in app with multiple features, but then after analyzing the user behavior, the founders discovered that photo sharing was the most used feature, leading them to pivot into a photo sharing app. So initially it was an app which had several features, but today Instagram is known for just photo sharing, because they found that that is the main feature which was used by the user. That's the customer feedback. Then the third part is the accelerate. Once you establish, okay, customers are wanting this particular thing, you go in that direction in a big way. Or if you realize that they are not wanting this particular thing, pivot and change the direction. Okay, so Airbnb's success came from focusing on improving trust between hosts and the guests by adding features like host verification, professional photography, which scaled the business significantly. So some of the practical applications, many of the entrepreneurs, if they go through this book, they get a lot of guidelines, basically, as to how you can build your business over a period of time to be sustainable. And even larger organizations, when they come up with the innovative products or they want to introduce a new product, they can take up a lot of the principles from this particular book. And it can be extremely useful for any new product development or any sort of development or services which will be useful. So my conclusion is it's a real must read for any of the new entrepreneurs or divisional heads within large organizations who are expected to innovate and bring about new products from time to time. Okay, so that's the brief summary of what the book is all about. Now I will turn to my two lovely panelists, well accomplished, one architect and one chartered accountant, both running their business. So I chose them because I have to explore how relevant this book and the reading was for them. So my first question to Srikanth, the same question is applicable to Kannan later. So what are your key takeaways from the book and how did you enjoy reading this book?
Definitely it was a pleasure to read the book, and it brings a new perspective into startups. What basically, see, lean manufacturing or lean is not unknown. It's very well known in manufacturing circles. It's been there for quite some time now. So right from 95 we've been talking lean manufacturing, JET and everything. But then what Reese has done is take the lean manufacturing concepts and apply them to startups, which is something very strange. And the way he's done it, the way he's giving examples is nice, especially. So but that is not the main thing. What I feel is pivot and persevere is something that I really enjoyed, because I've interacted with a lot of startup owners and startup entrepreneurs. One thing I find is they get locked into one idea. There's only one way of doing it. And then they keep on pumping in resources into it, even at the cost of losing money for the venture, the investors. Now, if they only read this concept and they really do this type of measure, maybe they will come to the conclusion that maybe this is not the right way, maybe we can pivot and go another direction. No, but then it has to happen. The book suggests it and gives extraordinarily good case studies about how it can be done. Then they should. I mean, this is my takeaway from this. The other takeaway is a quotation. He defines product very beautifully. He says product is anything that encompasses value for a person who becomes or is willing to become a customer. Fantastic definition. Product is, he doesn't go for the, so which means product is now opened out. It is no longer a thing or even a service. It's anything, any attribute of something that some customer wants becomes a product. That's another wonderful idea.
So any need is a product.
Any need. And if you are able to satisfy that need, I think that is a product. And that definition was something new for me, and that's something I'm going to take away from this book.
Wonderful. Yeah. Kannan, your views.
Yes. Firstly, when I read the book, I first thought that, okay, he defines startups in a way which I was not very accustomed to. So when they put startups as a kind of business which is not traditional, which is out of the traditional mindset. So you need an entirely different mindset of management to manage this kind of a maverick company. So if you've been doing a certain things in a certain way for hundreds of years, and then since what you're doing is absolutely, it's taking a complete U-turn, how you do it obviously has to change. So that is one of the strong key takeaways for me. Apart from, adding to what Mr. Srikanth was talking about, one of the key things that I learned, which was directly, which would have a great impact on my business, was to close the feedback loop brilliantly. Because feedback loop is something which, as as time goes by in your business, we have a complacency, we have an assumed reaction to, okay, yeah, my client's going to love this. So you create something and then you automatically think that, okay, no, I'm going to have a blast of a time with my client during the meeting. He's going to love this and they're going to say yes to all the things that I'm going to say. So at some point of time, that assumption, that soap bubble gets pricked and you fall down to the floor and your learning starts there. So this is a kind of a thing where you take that feedback and then you meticulously re-engineer your product and then you bring it back into the fold, and the magic only happens when that feedback goes into your process and not just that one single product that you have delivered to that client. When it goes back into the system which you've been developing for quite some time, that is where the magic happens, because every single feedback from a client or a user of the product shapes the way you do things. It doesn't just shape the product, or it doesn't just shape one idea or one delivery or one batch of your idea. It changes the way you do things. It changes you as a person yourself. So that is one of the major takeaways for me. And there is this famous saying in Tamil, it goes as "Oru pani sotrukku oru soru padam." So that is kind of what Mr. Rees is saying. It translates to when you're cooking a rice in a pot, you don't have to measure the softness of the rice in every single morsel. You just have to take one grain, one morsel, and you have to see if it's done. So if you can do that, you can assume that the rest of the grains are all cooked properly. So that is what Rees was suggesting. So we have quite some examples which I might be sharing in the later questions, which might come. So we followed the thing, and we incorporated several ideas, and it had given polar results, not necessarily the positive results. It has given astonishing results, both positive and sometimes it makes me rethink, okay, what have I been doing all these years? That kind of thing, yes.
Wonderful perspective. So feedback loop is very, very important according to Kannan, and the pivot is something which is very important. The definition of product, which is actually something which came up. So my next question, so among all these concepts like build, measure, learn, minimum value product, validated learning, which concept really resonated with you? Like, where do you say, okay, this dumb, like this, I could really relate to this particular concept?
From the perspective of startups, I think. No?
Yeah.
See, as I told you, startups generally, get hold of the founder. Actually, see, basically, it's an idea that gets converted into a business. Now, when that happens, sometimes there is a lot of stubbornness about moving away, but that's pivot and persevere. Going beyond that, he suggests, the build, measure, the measure part, very clearly he talks about two things. He talks about one thing called value, and he talks about growth. So value metrics and growth. So both value hypothesis and growth hypothesis. Now, this is, I think, what we should, many startups don't do this. They, as he rightly said, they honestly think what they are doing is what the customer wants. So the value hypothesis needs to be tested, possibly periodically, and the only person who can validate this hypothesis is the customer. Nobody else can do it for you. I don't think a market survey or a marketing, with all due regards, consultant can do it for you. Maybe the consultant could do a fair survey and give. Now, one more thing which I also found about this book, one of the criticisms is, see, that's nice, but then you cannot take the customer for granted. Sometimes the customer doesn't know, but how to correct that? See, there I think Rees makes a very good point. He is not asking you to talk to a single customer or even a group of customers. He's saying go across broad base of your customers, collect data and study it, and then see statistically where it's moving. And if it's moving away from where you think it has to go, I think there's a reason to question the value. And then of course the growth hypothesis. So I think that's going to put their feet firmly on the ground. If a startup really follows this, then what happens is they'll be able to go to market faster, and they'll be able to hit with the right idea, right product faster, rather than keep guessing and making mistakes, costly mistakes. It's not just money, it's also time spent on this. Many times startup entrepreneurs who fail, it's not the money that they regret, it's the time that they wasted on this. So they could save all that if they follow this idea.
So unlike the conventional marketing survey and finding that, okay, this could work, what he's saying is just actually test it. Get it across and get the feedback of the customers so that you're absolutely sure about the outcome. You minimize the uncertainty. I think that's what resonated with you much more. Okay. What about you, Kannan?
So yes, there are a couple of concepts which deeply resonated with our practice, what we do. One of the things is quick testing. Okay. So when you roll out a product before it's 100% ready, and then you put it out in front of the client and say, hey, what do you think about it? And the client doesn't have to know the full picture to give you a basic sense of whether he likes it or not. For example, I'm just going to give you an example of my own business. So when we are making, let's say I'm designing a residence for Srinivasan Ramprasad, for example. So let's say I'm making this beautiful bungalow type building with neoclassical semicircular arches, white marble and pediments and all that. And then I make a beautiful picture, I make an artist's impression of it, I put several maneuvers into it, and then I go to Ram Prasad and then he says, oh no, I'm looking for a postmodern building. I'm looking at something in steel and concrete. I'm not looking at marble and stucco. But all the hours that I've put in, assuming that, okay, Ram Prasad is that, he would probably like this. So that is all going to waste. So instead, what I could do is, I could probably show examples of the buildings, the types of buildings that we have earlier designed, and then put it across to them, hey, what do you think about it? So they can give me examples of the pictures that they liked, and also the pictures that they did not like. So that gives a clear indicator of what are the do's and what are the don'ts. So I can steer clear of the don'ts. So I don't have to waste half of my energy into things that are absolutely not going to be liked by the customers. So that is one of the clear things which resonated with us. And one of the things which actually kind of had mixed reviews was we were thinking of having, once I read this, okay, yeah, I'll apply it onto a project. So what I did was, I made a sketch of a building, and then I called the client, and then I proudly showed him, see, this is how your building is going to look like. And then this guy was like, but that's a sketch. It's not a building, it's a sketch. Okay, so they thought that a sketch is formed without due engineering, without due consideration of their requirements, without going through the process that it has to go through. Then when I actually explained to him what are the thought processes behind it, and then, okay, why is this particular thing this way and all that. So the things that I usually explain with a proper product. So then they were able to understand, okay, these are the process behind it. So the process has gone through. They're just trying to, take my feedback in the process itself. Then I told them, we have a policy that, you put client in the middle of the whole process and we involve them. So you are a part of the design process and all that. So when I said that, so they were able to take more of a buy-in into the idea. So it was a bit of a mixed review. And I also got to understand how I could pitch this idea to the next customer. This is one of the key things that resonated in my practice. And the second major thing which I got was the performance metrics which he's talking about. Because see, you cannot solely judge the performance of any business by the revenue or in, let's say in Srikanth's business or in my business. Srikanth's business, the major thing is the top two things that you would look for in a chartered accountant's business is the money that they have made and the number of clients that they have served. Or number three, if you want to push the boundaries a little further, how many litigations they have avoided. Probably. So in my business, if you see, the metrics would be amount of money that I've made, the square footage of buildings that I've designed, or the number of buildings that I've designed. And we usually don't talk about the quality. We usually don't talk about that. That is not even on the top 3 or 4 things, but that is something which I thought was really important to we have to bring that thing into the conversation. Then about 3 years ago, I introduced a concept in my office. It's called post-occupancy evaluation. Okay, so what I was going to do was, once I've handed over the design, once the construction was done, once the users have occupied the building, we walk into their building after a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then we ask them a series of questions depending upon the type of building, what it is, and then ask them, this is how I intended it, and how are you using it? How comfortable is it for you? Are you getting what you wanted to get from this particular thing? So the answers to the question is astonishingly, sometimes we are so spot on with our vision, and sometimes we are so far away from what we intended that, it makes us question the whole process itself. So the way you define your metric is one of the key things that resonated in our thing, because we constantly keep changing the way we measure success.
Okay, so metrics played an important role. Another important thing that came out is sometimes minimum value viable product can backfire, like sketch. Though sketch was considered as it's not up to it, unless he explained. So that is the downside of this MVP. So my next question was how these concepts are they really relevant to your business? Can they be used, or it's only for startups? That's it. That's the question. I think many of it you answered, but still, if you have some more, please share with us.
Yeah, you want me to go?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Let's change the order.
Okay. So I recently, read a book or watched a video of on Simon Sinek. He's an author and he's a motivational speaker. So he talks about SEAL Team 6. Okay. SEAL Team 6 is the most productive organization in the entire world. And he was interacting with the captain of SEAL Team 6, and then he asks him, what are the qualities of a Marine or a person which you want, so that you can tell him that, okay, you are a SEAL Team 6 member now. So this general immediately, pulls out a paper and says, he draws a graph, x-axis and y-axis. On the y-axis he writes performance, and on the x-axis he writes trust. He says that anybody with a high performance, I have a doubt in my mind. I do triple checking to anybody who has a high performance quotient. Anybody who is low performance, I do the check only once. Because his idea was, if a high performing member has a low trust value, then it becomes a very toxic to the entire situation. And if a high trust person has a very, very low or even a negligible performance is something you can always improve. There are tons of metrics for that. So taking metrics for trust is something which there are absolutely no known metrics for trust. So when Reese was talking about different types of metrics for different, how do you measure success? When he was talking about don't measure in conventional terms like finance or how much money you've got, or instead talk about what is the customer engagement that you've produced. So instead of getting the customers is one thing, marketing is one thing, and how customers react with your product or how customers engage with you, what is the quality of the engagement that you have. And when he talks about that, that makes me that made me wonder a lot of things, because often the kind of questions that customers ask us is what defines us. They ask those questions which they think you can answer, which they think you are confident of, which they think you are capable of. So you can see the way they are asking the questions, and then you can create a picture of what they have about you in their mind. So that was a very good insight for me, which I thought, directly I can use that kind of a metric, in everyday discussions and topics.
See, basically, as you know, I'm a consultant and a practicing CA, more of a consultant. So directly in my organization, I don't see any, because this is for startups. Ours is a 50-year-old firm. So seriously, I don't see. But then I always look at myself as a startup, in the sense that every day the organization has to think like a startup is one point. But in that spirit, I am not able to take much, because Lean, see, we are already a process-driven firm, and we already have processes in place, people who work for processes and with processes and all that, and customer-driven, client-driven and all that. See, for example, if anybody, you can walk into my office anytime, call any random employee of mine and ask him and call him, who is the most important person in your organization? I assure you, he will say, not Srikanth, client or customer, client. So they know it, and we always listen to the client, and we don't make that mistake of assuming, because when you assume what the client wants, you make an ass of him and me. So assume makes an ass of you and me. So no, better not. Rather ask, find out what is it you want. And then, as you rightly said, give them options and then choose. Having said that, from a different perspective, I loved some of the concepts, because usually Lean is rarely associated with service industry. We have value analysis for service industry to an extent, we do it. But pure Lean principles, I think applying it in service industry is a good idea. Not necessarily startups. Even service companies like architects and accountants can look at it. I'm thinking of implementing some of the Lean ideas, like he talks, instead of just in time, sometimes the idea we should plan it in such a way that we don't